When corporate heavyweights vie for a prized piece of infrastructure, you can expect a lot of drama. And the race to become the country's third major telco player was no exception, riddled with conspiracy theories and controversies. But despite criticism that the requirements set favored a particular group, in this case the consortium of President Duterte's main campaign donor, that of Davao-based businessman Dennis Uy and his partner, China Telecom, the DICT insists that the process has been transparent and valid. Something our debaters will weigh in on in this episode. Hello, I'm Mike Yorata, and you're watching Square Off Season 16, The Firm Debates. After months of delays, the government has finally named Davao businessman Dennis Uy and China Telecom's consortium Misletel as the provisional new major player to challenge the Globe and PLDT duopoly. It was one of three that submitted selection documents. The other two were disqualified. PT&T for missing certification of 10 years of nationwide operation.
There's a court case that's pending in Makati. We just need to make sure that that's heard. That's all.
And Chavit Singson's Sear Telecommunications for failing to submit a 700 million peso letter of credit for its participation security.
The participation security is supposed to be a letter of credit, but our diligent efforts to get one was met with a legitimate query on the wording of the letter of credit. Because every letter of credit is custom-made, tailored fit for a particular transaction.
Another interested party, Now Corp, ended up not submitting bid documents. It had questioned the validity and the rationale of the requirements.
First, you're going to spend on a minimum 140 billion to 240 billion. That's number one. Over 5 years. Now, if you're going to look at the math, that's going to be at least equal to what Smart and Globe is spending on a yearly basis. But at the same time, your frequencies that to be allotted to the major player, to the new major player rather, will only be what? 20%? Because the rest is with Smart or the rest is with Globe. Diba? That is the business risk that every telecommunications consortium will be entering into the new major player selection. It is as if the selection process was made to fail.
But telco officials and experts are firm that the selection process was transparent and legitimate. And despite having just one group qualify, the results are valid.
The important thing here is, we follow the instruction of the President that whatever the outcome of this will give competition to the Globe and Smart and will improve our telecommunication services.
While Misletel's franchise is now being questioned over a previous contract with Digifil Technology, a member of the disqualified Sear Telecommunications, it seems that things are moving forward. Misletel is looking to start accepting subscribers by mid-2019. But that begs the question, are the requirements imposed by the NTC and the DITC in the selection of the third telecom player valid and constitutional? Arguing for the affirmative side is the University of Perpetual Health. From the institution guided by the principles of aspirations and hope, leadership and determination, the future lawyers of University of Perpetual Health System Delta.
Debating for me is a way to communicate a message that needs to be provided to other people so that they can weigh for themselves the different perspectives and point of views and therefore have an intelligent discourse on a specific topic.
Debate is an argument usually both sides are right. It's a gray area issue. that it depends on how you portray your argument.
As a debater, I would consider myself as assertive. I am really firm with my arguments, but sometimes my points may seem a little off, but I do compensate them by trying to prove a point.
Team University of Perpetual Help System Delta. Courageous, determined, strong. And taking on the negative side is Beda University. Committed to the battle for the greater good, the Red Lions of Beda University.
Debating is not just about giving arguments. It is about finding what is suitable for every issue, and it is not about winning. It is about knowing the stand of each individual and how it could coexist with each other in order for us to coexist in this society.
Debating is a passion of mine. It's an activity that makes me feel really good. It's exhilarating. It's something that I would like to share to other people because of the happiness it gives me.
Well, debating for me is a way to incentivize yourself to catch up with relevant social issues, whether it be in the field of technology, social advocacies, all of that. Well, it's just that craft.
Team Beda University. Wise, humble, committed. Let's now meet our distinguished judges. First off, we have attorney Mark Benjamin Yam, a junior associate at the VNA law firm. Next, we have attorney Rene Pilapil Jr. of the De La Salle University College of Law. He's also the legal affairs head of the ACDI Multi-Purpose Cooperative. And presiding as our chief adjudicator, we have attorney Katrina Doble, a partner at the VNA law firm. We're using a modified Oregon-Oxford format. The debate is between two sides, the affirmative and the negative, with 3 members each. Each debater from the affirmative side argues the necessity, beneficiality, and practicability of the proposition, while the counterpart debaters on the negative side oppose these arguments. Each debater is given 4 minutes to deliver a constructive speech and rebut the previous argument. Each debater is given 2 minutes to interpolate or cross-examine the opposing debater. Only categorical questions may be asked. Each of the judges may ask 1 question of each speaker within that speaker's time limit. The judges score each team in terms of manner, matter, and interpolation. The team with a higher score from each judge gets a point. The team with the most number of points wins the debate. The chief adjudicator rules in the event of ties, objections, or contestations. This week's proposition, let it be resolved that the requirements imposed by the NTC and the DICT in the selection of the third telco player are both valid and constitutional. First up, for the affirmative side, we have Harley. Harley, you have 4 minutes to tell us why the requirements in the recently concluded telco race are valid and constitutional.
In deciding the constitutionality of a statute, every presumption favors the validity of the same, and whenever possible, statutes should be given a meaning that will not bring them in conflict with the Constitution. The words of Justice J.B.L. Reyes in the case of Noblejas versus Tehanki, stressing the presumption of validity in every law, executive order, memorandum, circulars, and all others passed or promulgated by the government. Your honors, colleagues, good evening. We, the affirmative side, firmly believes that the requirements imposed by the NCC and DITC under Memorandum Circular 99-2018 in the selection of the third telecom player are valid and constitutional on the following grounds. First, the NCC and DITC are vested with the power to administer policies that will help plan, develop, and promote the National Information and Communications Technology Development Agenda under RA 10844 for DITC and RA 7925 for the NTC. Second, it follows the due process. Third, the requirements promote pro-competition in accordance with RA 10667 or the Philippine Competition Act and seeks to break the duopoly of the 2 giant telco players, Globe and PLDT. Allow me to elaborate. First, for a law to be valid, the department or agency must be vested with the power to implement such law. NTC was created by the Congress to supervise, adjudicate, and control country's radio communications, telecommunication, and broadcast, including cable television facilities and services. The same objectives for the DICT under RA 10844. The requirements are just part of the quasi-legislative powers of the NTC and DICT, hence it is valid. Second, it is compliant with procedural due process, as it shows that the selection process is rigid enough to prevent the bending of such rules in favor of few entities. The memorandum has provided as a recourse for those entities aggrieved by the NTC Selection Committee's decision under Section 8, which parties may file a motion for reconsideration or an appeal to the NTC and Bank, to which the latter must resolve within 3 days from receipt of motion or petition. As to the substantive aspect, the fees imposed are reasonable as they are based on the weight of the requirement imposed upon them. The same is true when it comes to the bond and fees for the selection documents, and this has been the practice even in ordinary bidding procedures, both local and national government levels. No limit is imposed by the Constitution and the pertinent laws when it comes to fees. As long as due process is observed, such imposition of fees is not unconstitutional or invalid. Third, pursuant to Section 19, Article 12 of the Constitution, which is to promote free trade and competition, the MC is compliant because it prohibits dominant telecommunications player and related parties from participating and prevent abuse of dominant positions and mergers on acquisitions which may be anti-competitive in nature. This furthers the state's endeavor to prevent economic concentration, which shall control the production, distribution, trade, or industry that will unduly stifle competition, lessen, manipulate, or constrict the discipline of free market. Echoing back on what Senator Pimentel said, the goal here is to provide consumers with a viable alternative to the duopoly. It is not enough to offer consumers a third choice. We have to make an attractive option, one whose services can compete or better than the choices they have now. Only then will be able to reap the benefits of cutthroat competition, like better services at lower prices. Thank you.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
Council, do you know the current population of Beijing, China?
No.
Council, it's 21.7 million.
Okay.
Now, do you know the current population of the Philippines?
Yes.
Of course, what is it?
Around 100 million.
Good. So, which is bigger now in population, Beijing or the Philippines?
Philippines.
Of course. Now, Council, are you aware of the technical capability requirement in Memorandum Circular 0909-2018?
Yes.
Are you aware of Clarificatory Bid Bulletin Number 1, where it was said that regional scale requirement applies only to foreign countries, while local ones have to show that they can cover in a national scale?
But that is,
it is like the clarificatory bulletin wherein it was clarified that it is like that.
Yes.
So the memorandum unduly discriminates.
It is not
Continuing,
discrimination
Council, have
in
you heard of the bid of Now Telecom?
Yes.
So what about that of Sear Telecom?
Yes.
So both of them were not able to participate, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that both of them have nationwide technical capability?
Yes, but Now Telecom is still pursuing.
Sure. Now they also have the expertise in the field for at least 10 years, correct?
Yes.
So are you aware that if they were able to push through with the bidding? Are you aware of that?
Yes, they are able to push through. That's
no,
why
actually, Council.
They
you
are
don't know the facts. They
actually
weren't
still
able
going
to push
through with the bidding.
Continuing, Council, it is because they were not able to post that 700 million security bond, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, Council, are you aware of how much a local Filipino telco earns annually?
Around 50 billion.
Not really, Council. Let me enlighten you. A local Filipino telco earns around 7 to 10 million, with PTNT at around 28 million pesos, and Now Telecom at 6.7 million.
But what is your question, Council?
We'll get there, Council.
Okay.
If you have perfectly able corporations, Council, and not able to participate because of the fees, the effect then is undue restriction.
But the question
Council,
is, are they
in the
competitive
recent
enough
public bidding,
to-
can you name an applicant
No, but the
which was
question is,
able
are they
to secure a
competitive enough,
certificate
Council?
of... Please answer the question, Council.
Okay, Red, you've got 4 minutes now to advance your argument on why we should not accept the requirements set by the NTC and the DICT in the telco selection process as constitutional.
The entry of a new market player is a significant economic move that should not be taken with animosity. This debate is not about whether NTC and DICT have the power to promulgate the requirements, as they were conferred such power by RA 7925. Rather, this is about the specific requirements set that are unconstitutional. Beda University proudly submits that the requirements imposed by the NTC and DICT do not serve the very purpose of bidding because they are unreasonable. We have 2 points to argue, Your Honors. First, the memorandum violated the Equal Protection Clause espoused in Section 1 of the 1987 Constitution. And second, the requirement set promoting unfair foreign competition is not a valid exercise of police power. As to the first argument, the variation mandated by the memorandum as to the technical capability of the bidders is violative of the Equal Protection Clause. This is in direct rebuttal of the argument of the affirmative that there is a presumption of regularity, as this is now being disputed by the wrong use of such right. It seems that the affirmative side is actually value neutral in this debate. For a valid classification to be allowed, there must be substantial distinction and it should be germane to the purpose of the law. The memorandum under Section 2.3 requires the participant to show technical capability. However, its applicability differs as local members in the consortium are required to have had expertise in the national scale, while foreign members are only required regional scale, as clarified by the NTC in the Clarificatory Bulletin No. 1 released on October 11, 2018. The variation as well is not germane to the purpose of the law to provide an efficient telco service. The NTC cannot concern itself on whether or not we can incentivize foreign bidders for them to compete, because that is outside the mandate given to them by RA 7925. There is no necessity to provide for such classification that prejudices Filipino entities, where in fact it was said in Pasay versus Gelon that classification may only be allowed to favor Filipinos and not the other way around. Now, yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, is there any other way for us to be able to measure the technical capability of a foreign investor in the telcos?
Well, as to the technical capability, Your Honor, it is measured by the certification given by the NTC, wherein the NTC has to see if that foreign corporation has the machineries necessary to cover on a nationwide scale. And in this matter, the Philippine laws, the standards set by Philippine law should prevail, essentially because the coverage will be here in the Philippines and not in their home countries. Continuing, Your Honor. In a modern society, the administrative agencies such as the NTC are granted the prerogative to exercise police power, and according to Inot versus IAC, every administrative rule means that they must prescribe a lawful subject and the means used should be reasonably necessary to attain its purpose. Section 6 of the memorandum, yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, is it not that the requirement is 10 years of actual experience? And is it not true then that if it's actual experience, only regional measures can be applied to these foreign companies?
Not necessarily, Your Honor, because this poses an undue advantage to Filipino corporations, and for us to have a strict standard is very necessary in order for us to make sure that there is an equal competition in the country, as said in the case of Agan versus Riatco, and in which it was said that in public bidding, all of the bidders should be on equal footing. Continuing, Your Honor, 2017 reports show that Filipino telecommunication companies outside of the Big Two roughly earn 7 to 10 million pesos, in contrast with foreign telcos at around 5 to 10 billion dollars, as exemplified by the 10 companies who bought the bidding documents.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Good afternoon, good evening, Counsel. Okay, you talked about equal protection, and may I just, can you tell me about the 4 requirements of equal protection, please?
Sure. Well, for there to be a valid classification, then there should be a substantial distinction between the two parties. It should be germane to the purpose of the law. It should be equally applicable to both present and future conditions. And lastly, it must be applicable to all members of the same class.
But isn't there a substantial distinction when it comes to the selection of the bidders in this MC?
Not necessarily, because
but
both foreign
just yes
and
or
local
no?
companies...
Just yes or no?
No, I said no.
Okay. And isn't it a practice of police power as well that the NTC regulates the selection of the third telco player?
Yes, it is about the regulation.
Yes,
as said in RA 7925.
Yes, just yes or no. So, so the NTC is vested with the power to regulate. So they are actually exercising the police power that is vested.
Yes,
in them.
but that has to be subject to
you're saying that since they have they are able to validly exercise the police power, it means that MC is
We're actually saying
valid.
here that they actually went
Yeah.
beyond to the
Just yes or
beyond
no,
their
Mr.
authority,
Speaker.
as said in the case
just
of
yes or no,
Locking
Mr.
Jr.
Speaker.
versus
Yes,
Comelec, in which they had
yes or
to
no,
go
Mr. Speaker.
with
Just
the
yes or no,
following
Mr.
with the
Speaker.
requirements
Just
of
yes
a
or no,
valid
Mr. Speaker.
administrative rule. I
Just yes
said
or no,
yes, I
Mr.
know.
Speaker. Okay. All right. And are you aware that in this MC, the loophole in the loophole in the requirements doesn't necessarily equate to invalidation?
It isn't valid because the loophole is actually
yes or
substantial.
no? Just yes or no,
It
Mr.
is a
Speaker.
loophole. It is
no,
very
yes,
substantial.
but loophole, does it necessarily equate to invalidation?
Yes.
No, no, Mr. Speaker. And then when it comes to equal protection, or let's say, have you been a subscriber of both telco players? Yes. Okay, and how long have you been a subscriber? Thank you.
Let's now hear from the second affirmative speaker, Cecil. You've got 4 minutes to tell us why it would be beneficial to deem the telco requirements as valid and constitutional.
Your Honors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The Philippines is known as a texting capital of the world, and is actually one of the fastest growing smartphone market in ASEAN. The relevance of internet connectivity in e-commerce, we see that in trading, in banking, even in transportation. These growing advancements in telecommunication and its increasing relevance in daily life makes availability of reliable, cost-friendly, and innovative products important, which tends to be limited in an industry dominated by only 2 players. As various studies have shown, competition plays a major role in improving and expanding services, lowering prices, and offering innovative products. In this regard, the requirements set forth by the NTC and the DICT under MC 99-2018 is valid as it answers a definite public interest, and it seeks to stop the concentration of control over the telecommunication industry in pursuant of Article 12, Section 19 of the 1987 Constitution. The state shall regulate or prohibit monopolies when the public interest so requires. Pursuant to these state goals, and as further emphasized in the Philippine Competition Act, Republic Act 10667, the MC is compliant by preventing economic concentration that will unduly stifle competition and constrict free trade. By providing the specific qualifications, as stated in Section 2, that the participants are not allowed to be dominant telecommunication players and is not a related party to any of the dominant telecommunication players. Despite these prohibitions, the MC remains constitutional and non-violative of the Equal Protection Clause.
Council, would not bettering the regulations for telecommunication companies be more efficient than forcing a third telco company without a proper basis?
That can be another way of helping the telecommunication industry. However, based also on our own experience, the introduction of a third telco player in 2003 actually made use or became known to us the use of only texting, lowering the prices of calls and text messages. In that sense, it is beneficial to provide those kinds of competition within the telecommunication industry. Okay, to proceed. With these prohibitions, the MC remains constitutional and non-violative of the Equal Protection Clause because there is substantial distinction. No one is singled out. It is germane to the purpose of the law, as I have already explained, and the classification is not only for existing conditions. Moreover, it applies equally to all the members of the same class. As I have previously expressed, we can learn from the experience of the past. Before 2003, text messages amounted to 2 pesos and 50 centavos per text to other networks, while calls amounted to 8 pesos per minute. With the entrance of another telco player in the industry, the term only text and only calls was first introduced and call charges became lower. From this experience alone, we see the threat of competition can force market players to provide a more extensive and innovative services with cheaper costs. With this
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Good evening, Cecil.
Good evening.
It is your position that the requirements enjoy the presumption of regularity?
It is the position of
Okay, so
our
tell me,
group, yes.
counsel, is this presumption juris tantum or presumption juris et de jure?
Juris tantum.
Okay, so it is rebuttable presumption. It
Yes.
means that this presumption could be overturned by evidence. So now let's say that the requirements are tainted with unreasonability. Can this evidence overturn the presumption of regularity?
Because it's a presumption.
Therefore, it is not enough that you end your analysis in the existence of this presumption. Next question.
We're not
Are
ending
you
our
aware-
analysis in the existence of
Let's
that
proceed.
presumption.
Let's proceed,
In fact,
counsel. My time.
your
Are you
explanation
aware
of
of the
presumption
case
does
of
need evidence
Manila
which you're not
International
providing.
Airport versus Olongapo Maintenance?
Enlighten me, counsel.
Okay, sure. So that says that the main consideration of public biddings is the maximum benefit for the general public.
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, salus populi est suprema lex, that the supreme law is the welfare of the people.
Yes.
So now, would you agree with
social
me
justice.
that the rules must always be promulgated with the welfare of the people in mind?
Definitely. And
But
this is
then,
what the MC is
the
trying
rules
to do.
are unduly restrictive to the extent that some corporations who are qualified, who can offer competitive pricing, are disqualified.
The question of whether
because
they
of the
are
mere
able to provide
mere
proper technical
restriction of
capabilities, or
exorbitant
that they are
fees.
even able to provide
Okay,
the technical.
so it's
is
entirely
actually a
possible
question of
that
fact.
the winning bidder
and
is
the
not the
question
best
of whether they can
and
do
the cheapest
it
bargain.
is something
My
that
time.
only the
Yes or
experts
no only,
can
counsel.
do.
Okay, then
And
you
that's
are
why
not
you have an
considering
Excel
the welfare of the
explanation for
general
that. You have an
people.
Excel
Are you
formula.
aware of the Filipino First Policy under Section
Yes,
10
but
article?
that is also not
Okay,
absolute.
So
The
you
Filipino
know that
First Policy
as between two
proposes
options,
that the Filipinos' welfare
my
has
time.
to be the
You're not
first.
respecting my time.
Joel, you now have 4 minutes to tell us why it would not be in the country's best interest to deem the requirements in the telco selection process as constitutional.
The law on public bidding is not an empty formality. It is based on the principle that under ordinary circumstances, fair competition in the market tends to lower prices. Your Honors, 2 points for non-beneficiality. First, it is not beneficial to comply with requirements that renders the Filipino First Policy nugatory and superfluous. And second, the unduly restrictive rules frustrate competitive pricing for the benefit of public consumers. First benefit, Your Honors, the Constitution expressly states, yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, is it not that the Filipino First Policy applies only to national patrimony and heritage?
Filipinos' welfare
My
has
time.
to be the
You're
first.
not respecting my time.
Joel, you now have 4 minutes to tell us why it would not be in the country's best interest to deem the requirements in the telco selection process as constitutional.
The law on public bidding is not an empty formality. It is based on the principle that under ordinary circumstances, fair competition in the market tends to lower prices. Your Honors, 2 points for non-beneficiality. First, it is not beneficial to comply with requirements that renders the Filipino First Policy nugatory and superfluous. And second, the unduly restrictive rules frustrate competitive pricing for the benefit of public consumers. First benefit, Your Honors, the Constitution expressly states, yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, is it not that the Filipino First Policy applies only to national patrimony and heritage and matters of culture and the environment?
Yes, and that is exactly the reason why we should give preference to the Filipinos in case of the telecommunication markets, because the telecommunication will be ingrained in the culture of Filipinos. It will be embedded in our everyday lives. So continuing, the Constitution expressly states that in Article 12, Section 10, that in grant of rights, privileges, and concessions covering the national economy and patrimony, the state shall give preference to qualified Filipinos. The Filipino First Policy is a product
of Philippine nationalism, and it must be enforced in accordance to the supreme law of the land. Hence, a country must be controlled by its own citizens by giving preference to a Filipino corporation which is just as qualified as foreign equity corporations, as stated in the case of Manila Prince Hotel versus GSIS. This constitutional mandate is ignored. As discussed earlier by my first speaker, foreign members are only required to have a regional scale coverage of their telecommunication services, but local members are mandated to cover the area on a national scale. This is where the problem comes in. As between two equally situated entities, we must prefer the Filipinos. But based on the rules, in a case where Filipino corporation and a foreign corporation have the same capability of regional scale coverage, despite of them being equal, it is the foreign corporation that would win the bid. A law requiring the actual denial of the equal protection of the law has no difference between a law that permits such denial as held in the case of People versus Vera. There is an invalid discrimination in the requirements because it is easier for foreign corporations to qualify. Your Honors, if we render the requirements unconstitutional and mandate an equal imposition and requirements for the impositions, then we can breathe life to the Filipino First policy, and in conclusion, would not make the constitutional mandate nugatory and superfluous. Which brings me to my second argument, that unduly restrictive rules frustrate competitive pricing for the benefit of public consumers. In Memorandum Circular 09092018, the current requirements are not just unreasonable, but it also does not contribute in the attainment of the purpose of the bidding. As stated in the case of Agan versus Piatco, an essential element of a publicly bidded contract is that all bidders must be on equal footing. It is imperative that we eradicate any discrepancy in the requirements imposed to preserve the integrity and faith of the general public on the procedure. And also because of the rules, bidders that could have been very qualified to win and serve as third telecom player will be disqualified when they could have provided the best possible service. Your Honors, if we don't render these requirements unconstitutional, then we allow a flawed system of choosing the third telco major player which will handle classified individual data of Filipinos. We are putting the identities of Filipinos in the hands of the product of a wrongly chosen bidder. The rationale behind the requirement of a public bidding as a mode of awarding government contracts. Thank you.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Good evening. You said in your speech that the telecommunication industry can affect the culture of the Filipino people and therefore should be considered national patrimony.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So would you, going on the lines of that kind of argument, then you're saying cable networks should also have that kind of privilege?
No,
Cable
this case is
that
different
shows
because
American,
we have been
American
under the duopoly of
television
Globe and Smart
series?
for a long time. And of course, we can see that Globe
I'm
and
sorry,
Smart
it's a yes or no
have
question.
been a big
It's a yes
part
or no
of
question.
our lives.
Therefore,
they are part of our national
you're
patrimony.
saying that those kinds of cable networks can actually have an effect on the culture of the land and therefore should also be regulated as you have
Counsel, your logic is flawed because why are you comparing telecommunication
because you're
services
saying that
to cable
telecommunication
services?
can affect the culture, but telecommunication actually provides a service where information cannot actually be censored, right?
What is the relevance in our
Therefore,
debate?
you cannot just say that it should be part of national patrimony as opposed to how the Manila Hotel case was actually ruled. Now, let me go to another argument. You were saying that foreign corporations are given a better treatment in this.
They have been given an easier
Let me ask
barrier
this question. That's a
to
question.
enter
Yes
the
or no? Yes or no?
telecommunications market.
Yes or no, Mr.
Yes.
Okay.
I
Yes,
already
they
said
were
that.
given a better, but actually,
Not
under
better,
the rules,
easier requirement.
under the rules of the bidding, foreign corporation can only enter the bidding in partnership with a domestic corporation.
Of course,
holding
because
a
that is in line with our constitution that
And
we could not let foreign corporations to
therefore, you
run here
cannot
in the
just say that
country.
it's only foreign corporations.
Let's now hear from the third affirmative speaker, Nathan. You've got 4 minutes to tell us why it would be practicable to accept the requirements imposed by the NTC and the DICT in the telco selection process as valid and constitutional.
Good evening. Our team firmly affirms on the proposition that the requirements of the selection of the MNT is valid. Now, I would raise 3 points to show or highlight that it is highly valid. First, it protects the selection of the NMP. It is set to prepare a third telco player that would have the capacity to compete with the other major players that have already been there. Now, the reality here is we have to face the fact that the other two major players, or DMTs, have already been there for a number of years. And we are giving the burden to another telco player to catch up to those two major players. And of course, they have to have the financial capacity to do so. Third is that the selection process actually ensures the commitment from all the participants through a form of performance securities. The thing is, we need to have bidders that mean business in order for us to be able to ensure that we have a successful selection process. We don't need to have anyone that could be easily bought out in order for us to be able to proceed further on selecting an NMT. Now, the second point we have is it fully lays down the entire bidding process transparently. As the DICT secretary points out, that the selection process is non-discretionary and all the data would be used for the selection is inputted by the participants using an Excel file. And the Excel file uses the computations in order for us to come up with the best bidder. Now, aside from that, the selection criteria lays down in entirety the process from the national population coverage, minimum average broadband speed, capital and operational expenditure up to the motion for reconsideration and appeal. And lastly, the third point is that the requirements is highly reasonable. Fact is, presently around the world, persons, be it natural or artificial, have been impacted by the digital race. Telecommunications, especially the use of internet, has been a need. The Filipino people has never been an exception. Actually, as of December 17, the Internet World Stats identifies 62.9% of our Filipino people are internet users. So this also involves businesses like BPO industries, which are contributing to our economy today. Online apps for food deliveries, chauffeur services, banking, utilities, and even retailers using their own site or the social media has been a trend. Now, the reason why I'm citing these is that the point here is the choosing of a third telco player is immensely imbued with public interest. And that would be the only reasonable,
Being imbued with public interest, is it your team's position then that only considerations of practicality and effectiveness are the only important considerations in this debate?
Thank you so much for your question. Actually, no, sir. No, Your Honor, rather. The thing is, the reason why we're highlighting the practicability in here is because we are in great need of having another third telco player that would be able to jump up the competition, that would ramp up the performances of the other two. The problem here is the requirements alone just focuses on. The requirements here alone just focuses on the requirements are rather sorry. The requirements here. The reason why I'm
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Counsel, your speech merely reiterated the requirements. The race for the third major telecommunications player began with 10 bidders, correct?
Yes, sir.
A lot had to drop out due to lack of the financial capability, yes?
Yes.
The fact,
thing is,
Your Honors, that the majority of the initial bidders had to drop out due to the exorbitant amounts reinforces the notion of unreasonable fees. Counsel, now Telecom had to drop out due to a pending suit against the NTC, correct?
Yes.
The NTC modified the originally published TOR by adding a 700 million peso participation security.
But that is
yes?
only practical because the amount of money is not in question in here.
Your Honors, this is an instance of surreptitiously changing a previously published TOR in which insider information favoring certain bidders can flourish. Counsel, from 10 interested bidders, only 3 contenders were left in the end, correct?
Yes.
And from those 3, 2 were disqualified.
Yes.
The NTC did not issue a certification to PTNT because of a qualifier that regional coverage only applies to foreign companies. Yes or no?
Yes.
This clarificatory bulletin changed what's written in the final terms of preference. Yes or no?
No.
Madam, the clarificatory bulletin having the qualifier essentially changed it. These are circumstances showing an addition of qualifiers so that the only one that fits would be the favored bidder evincing a pattern of tailored fit qualifications. Counsel, it would cost 10 million pesos for a disqualified applicant to file a motion for reconsideration.
Yes.
Correct? And the appeal fee is non-refundable.
Of course.
And this
Why
rule
would they
still-
have any
Counsel,
appeals that would be a
this
delaying
rule still
tactic for the
applies
others?
even if one's appeal is based on meritorious grounds. Correct?
No.
Your Honors, disqualified applicants are deprived of due process because the fees are exorbitantly high so as to render the remedy of the option of an appeal illusory.
So what's
Counsel,
the question?
The rules state that...
Are you having your speech right now?
Nikolai, you've got 4 minutes now to tell us why it would not be practicable to deem the telco requirements as valid and constitutional.
Unleashing the Philippine entrepreneurial spirit, Team San Beda submits the requirements imposed are unconstitutional for being anti-competition and anti-Filipino. 2 points in this speech. 1, the requirements are impracticable for an efficient telecommunications industry, and 2, on the costs of foreign capture over the national economy. Before that, Your Honors, a bit of rebuttals responding to their entire case. It is an invalid administrative rule because the fees are exorbitant. It is unreasonable. The NTC went beyond the authority given. There is no procedural due process because of the new qualifiers given in the clarificatory bid bulletins. These are all irregularities evincing a pattern of tailor-fit qualifications. There is a limit to these fees insofar as it does not go against Section 19, Article 12 of the Constitution prohibiting unfair competition, monopolies, and restraint of trade. First point, the NTC promulgated appeal fees, participation, and performance securities to guarantee and assure the bidders will deliver its commitments. Yes, as noble as these intentions may be, Your Honors, the fees and securities comes at the cost of being onerous, confiscatory, and unduly restrictive, amounting to denial of opportunities. True, they value ensuring that contenders have the financial and technical capability. However, this should not mean that the bar be exorbitantly high to the point of excluding players who could have participated in the bidding had it not been for the unreasonable requirements. Should there be a bar with a lower amount of fees and securities, the 3 criteria for choosing the new market player remains the same. Meritocracy is still retained. In our side of the house, other qualified participants could still participate, thus a more diverse and competitive selection. We have a constitutional provision mandating fair competition in Section 19, Article 12. It is impracticable to impose unnecessary rules at the cost of a fair competition. The excessive fees, ladies and gentlemen, also operate to further entrench the existing duopoly. The new market player is required to incur an inordinate amount of funds and carry out commitments at the pace not required of the current dominant service providers, i.e. Globe and PLDT. Ergo, by the time an NMP emerges, the NMP continues to be burdened by the financial hurdles as a consequence of the requirements imposed, impeding its capacity to compete with the existing duopoly. Second argument, side affirmative values the entry and preference of foreign companies to expedite the economy, whereas we argue that maintaining the Filipino first policy incentivizes the participation of domestic players and promotes national self-sufficiency. We are not against foreign companies.
Counsel, the concept of unconscionable fees or bonds that are being required of the bidders is in the context of protecting a right to bid. Is the right to bid the one that your team is seeking to protect?
Yes, Your Honor. Because of the exorbitant amounts, it excludes players who could have otherwise participated. Once we lower this bar, we could have a more diverse and more competitive bidding selection. Let me clarify. Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, isn't it that if your basis is that a 10 million appeal fee is unreasonable, then it doesn't really go into the capacity to bid, if that's your basis for arguing that it's not beneficial.
Your Honor, the appeal fee is just one of the requirements we are assailing. We are assailing the amounts of the participation security, the performance security, as well as the appeal fee. In the words of Justice Jackson, the remedy of an appeal is rendered as a teasing illusion similar to that it already is rendered as illusory because the amount is already too high. We are not against foreign companies operating, but against the selection process skewed in favor of foreign companies.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Good evening, Nikolai.
Good evening.
Are you aware of the importance of an appeal fee?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we could actually agree to each other that the appeal fee is there to avoid any delaying tactics from any other members of the bidding process.
But if the ground is meritorious, they
Yes or
are
no,
deprived
sir?
of due process.
Yes or no,
they
sir?
cannot appeal the
Yes or
ground.
no, sir? You're assailing the fees or the amounts of those fees.
Your
So it's a yes or
justification
no.
is not the only justification.
No, it's a yes or no, sir.
No.
Okay. Now, are you aware of the time it takes for us to even build up or build up a sales site?
Enlighten me, counsel.
It's actually 8 months. Now, are you aware of the projected amount of one of the supposed players, the new major player before, when he was actually when the owner was
What
actually
does
about
that
to come
have
in?
to do with 700 million?
Well, what I'm actually about to say is the amount that he actually said was $1 billion US, and actually, if you convert that to pesos now, it's around 55 billion pesos. So it's actually the same. It's almost the same amount of what is projected on the MC.
140 billion performance security is what is required.
Was it?
Which a majority of
actually
companies in the
700
Philippines
million
cannot
in performance
shoulder.
security, sir.
How is that
It's
reasonable?
0.5%.
And even if it was reasonable, would it be sustainable for a company in the long
It's my turn to ask questions. Okay. Now, mainly, are you also saying that the Filipino first policy is actually absolute?
Yes.
Is it absolute?
Yes.
Even when you are in need, when you are in a
It's a
dire need
constitutionally
already?
mandated desideratas. Father Bernas defended.
Let's now hear what our judges have to say
I felt
about
that
our
the affirmative side had very good substantial arguments, although I felt that the manner of delivery could have used some work, especially the level of confidence you have in your own arguments.
And Attorney Pilapil, how did the negative side do?
Given the difficulty of the position that the negative side was placed in, I consider their preparations very commendable, and I would like to congratulate the team for coming in with as many arguments as they can. Again, given the position that they have, it was also a balanced attack on the part of all of the speakers, and I would like to congratulate the negative side.
So now let's hear from our chief adjudicator, Attorney Doble. Who did the judges pick for best speaker?
And our best speaker comes from the negative side, Jaime Nicolay Panglao.
And the school that won this round.
So before I announce the winner, I'd like to congratulate both sides, considering that all of your workload, you're still able to prepare very well for today's debate. And the winning team, negative sides, and Beda University.
A big congratulations to San Beda University for winning the second quarterfinals. I'm Mike Yoreta. Thank you for watching.